welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have just a very inspiring guest coming right up, and his name is Nick Craig. He's here today to share with us his new book, Leading from Purpose. Now, Nick is the president and founder of the Authentic Leadership Institute, where he has guided over 5,000 executives in the last 10 years on a journey to discover and lead with purpose. He has worked with organizations including GE, Goldman Sachs, and West Point Military Academy. So let's welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you, Marianne. It's wonderful to be here today.
Oh, what a pleasure it is to have you here. You know, I got a hold of this book and could not put it down. My goodness, I think everyone who has a team, who wants to improve their lives or just wants to be better at what they do, they need to get this book. I mean, it's amazing.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you liked it.
Well, you know, and I've got all these great questions. I hope we can get through most of them today. One of them, you know, it's like, what started you on this path of researching purpose?
Well, you know, the funny part is you don't start, this is not something you sort of wake up one day and say you're going to research purpose. Mm-hmm. Back around 2006, I was working with a colleague named Bill George, and we were working on how do you help identify how do you create authentic leaders, and what does that look like? And he was teaching at Harvard Business School, and I was doing the corporate stuff, and we created a field book on what that looked like. And one of the topics we needed to cover was purpose. We knew we had to cover it. And I ended up having to work on it because nobody else who was on the team that was doing this had any clue what to do. So I started digging into, well, what does purpose really mean? And how do we help people really do this in a way that has the kind of impact that we would like it to be? And in some ways, I sort of let go of that, and I was focusing on some other things when a Fortune 10 company decided they wanted to run programs with us taking the lead, and they said, well, we want 2 or 3 things, and one of the things we want is purpose. And I was like, no, you don't want that thing. You don't want purpose. And they're like, yep, we're doing purpose. And I was like, oh, man. So 2007 to 2010, I'm running programs for the top 300 in this Fortune 10 company, and we're doing programs on purpose. Now, if any of you who are listening can realize, in some sense, 2007 to 2010 was a problem for most everybody because the 2008 recession is right in the middle of that. And for this particular organization, their stock went from 56 to 6. They went from being on top of the world and nobody had an answer better than them to there was no idea where the bottom was. And I got to watch this whole thing, and I got to teach all of our material through this whole journey. And what was interesting is about 2010, alumni who had done our earlier programs in 2007 were coming back and helping teach the program. And participants were saying, well, what helped you get through these challenging times, the times of enormous uncertainty? And consistently they would say purpose. And the first time this happened, I literally fell off my chair. I'm like, oh, my God. A lot of other things I thought they were going to say, but it wasn't purpose. But what this one gentleman said, Jim, is he said, look, I for 5 years have been running this business, and most of the time I had stock options and bonuses I could give people to do the tough things and keep everybody together. And now I was standing in front of everyone. We didn't even know if the business was going to be saved or we were going to be sold or anything. And I had none of these things to stand on. Where was solid ground for me? And he said, solid ground for me was my purpose. And he said, my purpose is to be the whitewater raft guide that safely gets you to the other side. Now, that particular orientation on his purpose came from earlier in his life where he was an actual whitewater raft guide, and he actually had saved people's lives. And so standing on top of that, he was able to get the group to really see that was who they'd always been following. And that was the thing that could withstand all the craziness, and it did. In some ways, once that started to happen, it just kept happening over and over again, and to the point where I realized purpose had something special about it that clarifies for us that unique gift that we are. And if we stand in it, we can stand in the face of uncertainty and have solid ground underneath us. And that's basically what has gotten me on the journey of the last 10 years.
What a beautiful story. And And, for our listeners that are still kind of going, well, gosh, what does purpose mean to me? And is there a definition, just a layman's definition that, our listeners can kind of better understand how that encompasses their life?
Yeah, so, purpose is one of those words that has gotten used in many different ways. So purpose is more than just a cause. And we have, I think, many causes we might fall in love with in our life. And purpose is that unique gift that you bring to the world that is you. And in some ways, the way to think about it is if, Marianne, we replaced you or anyone else listening in their life and their work with someone equally as skilled and capable, and then we were to say 3 months later to everybody, what do you most miss? The answer to that question would be your purpose. It's the thing that we add to the mix, to the skills, to the capabilities, to everything else that is our thing that if it's not there, then we didn't show up. And if it is there, it's because we were actually there. And in some ways, the real gift of purpose is that it's always been there. It'll always be there. When you were 2, it was there. When you were 102, it'd still be there. It's not like you retire from it. But it really is that unique gift that you bring to every context that is yours. And knowing it and owning it is the opportunity to lead from it. And that, in some sense, is a lot of what I've discovered.
So is that something that's initially kind of sparked early in life?
Well, think about it this way. If it's always with us, the interesting thing is how do we know, right? How do we find it? And so for me, what I've discovered in the work, and when you work, I've worked with over 10,000 people over the last 10 years and sort of figuring this thing out. In the early days, it was catch as catch can, and we sort of would bump into it. And the good news is that when someone steps into that place of purpose, everybody in the room knows it. It's like you feel there's a tingle that happens. There's a sense in the gut. It's not like you have a 5 list criteria and say, well, did you meet all the criteria? No, everybody knows when somebody steps into it. And in some ways, the stories in our life that tend to be the ones that are directly connected to purpose or more connected to purpose and bring out this aspect of us there's three different places. And one is our magical moments from our childhood. And they may be a brief moment. It could be something longer, but so many different people have a particular moment that they remember that when they step back into that experience, it brings out that gift of who they are. And in some ways, it's the curious kid inside of us shows up. So that's one big access point. Another big access point is when we've been most challenged in our life, in the most challenging experiences in our life, something gets us through to the other side. Okay? And we are enriched as a result of having gotten through. None of us deserve what we probably had to go through, but at the same time, we are a much better person on the other side. Now, how we got there is a key access point to purpose. The third place that purpose shows up for many of us is many of us have a passion, something that we have a passion for, whether it's singing or dancing or skiing or watching the rain or whatever the case it may be, that has been with us for an extended period of time. It's not something that we do because we're world class at it or because we get external gratification for it. We do it because of something inside of us that it feeds. It's like pure oxygen. And in some ways, that's another place that we find access to purpose. So those are the 3 main access points that I've found across cultures, across industries, across backgrounds for people, where you can find what that access is to your purpose.
When you started developing all this research for your book, Leading from Purpose, how long did it take you to just accumulate all that information? And it must have been difficult to decide what went in the book and what didn't.
Well, what's interesting is, let's just wait, the first 2 sections in the book are, in some sense, what I've spent the last 10 years doing, where it really was, what is it? how do you find it, and what are some beautiful examples of what real purpose looks like. And so that's in the book. The second half of the book is really about what is the impact that purpose has on us. And that took me a couple of years of interviewing, probably interviewed more than 75 people who I'd worked with over a 5 or 10 year period to really say, okay, what has this really done for you? What is it that purpose has done for you that nothing else does? And how do you use it? So in some ways, that's what helped me understand it. And what's interesting is that when I looked at all those interviews, there were some really powerful themes. And probably the one that jumped out at me and I didn't expect. Okay, so listen, I expected that it gives you more energy, right? Mm-hmm. I expected that it would help you make the hard right decisions versus the easy wrong decisions. There's some of them that I sort of expected because I've been around it, but the one I didn't expect that showed up everywhere was based on the question I asked, which was a random question I asked at the end of the first interview, just out of a lark, and then it turned out to be one of the more powerful questions, which is, what do you think would have not happened in your life if you didn't know your purpose? Yeah. Mm. And to the T, every person would say, there's a clarity that I have now. There's a focus, and there's a sense of confidence I have of what I need to do or what I've had to do that I was able to because I knew my purpose. And in most of the situations, these were situations where there was a lot of uncertainty. There was no real data that was dominant that could make it an easy choice for them. These were incredibly hard choices. These were career choices. These were choices in which the things they were going to do were going to probably create a lot of difficulty for them and others if they really did this thing. And in each of these cases, their purpose really clarified very clearly for them as to what they needed to do and how they needed to lead themselves and lead others in that particular context. And that just came up over and over and over again to the point where I couldn't ignore it, even though it wasn't something that I was looking for. So I think that's probably the big aha, and it goes through most of the book is that particular theme, that purpose is the ultimate antidote to uncertainty. And in a world that, these days I feel like the level of uncertainty that I find in the people I work with has increased dramatically. Nobody is saying, I have very few people that say they think 5 years from now things will be more certain than they are today. And in most of my life, everybody thought the future would be better than today. Now it's a little more interesting. So I think that my experience of interacting with all these people around purpose has really helped me see how much it really is something that's the solid ground we can stand on in times of uncertainty when the data isn't going to be there, but we still have to make a decision.
Mm. I love that. I think that makes perfect sense. And what great knowledge that you bring, where people are looking, you often hear people say, gosh, I wish I knew what my purpose was, or I need to uncover what my purpose is. And a lot of times people feel like there's a hole within them until they get that kind of figured out. They kind of feel like their compass is off.
Well, so think of it this way. Another way to think about it is this: our purpose is always there. It can't leave us. It's the one thing that won't reject us, will wait for us, and it is a deep part of who we are. I found that it really takes doing this work where we've got somebody else sitting down and working through some of this work to be able to help me see what my purpose is and vice versa, because we're so in it. Mm-hmm. So in some sense, the challenge for most of us when we feel that emptiness is not that purpose isn't working through us. It's that we're just not clear as to what is that is leading through us so that we can fully honor it and own it. There's a wonderful quote it's associated with Einstein, says that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life thinking that it's stupid.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a wonderful quote because we all can relate to having spent most of our life trying to climb a tree that somebody tells us we should climb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of our life is people saying, here's the tree you should climb. If you go through elementary to middle school to high school through college, it's all about climbing trees, other people's trees. And if you climb those trees and you climb them better than anybody else, then you get a pass to go to the best education in college or whatever. It's like all these things happen. I think the challenge for all of us is to know what is it that we're here to do. What is the stage we're meant to sing our song on, right? Oliver Wendell Holmes says most of us go to our grave with our music still in us. And so my experience with, much of my work has been with executives, and I get them usually when they've made it to the top, and then they go, okay, this feels really empty. Why is that happening, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, purpose and knowing it for them all of a sudden helps them be able to own what is it they're really there to do. Because at some point in your career, it's no longer about your skill or expertise. It's about who you are. And so the example I can give about 2011, I was running a program, and one of the guys in the program is the CEO of Ben & Jerry's, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And it turns out this guy is a turnaround guy, and Ben & Jerry's was bought by a company called Unilever about 15 years ago. And he had a 2-year turnaround job that he was supposed to do, turn around Ben & Jerry's, get it back on track. And he was pretty much on track to do that. He was 18 months into a 24-month turnaround. And he'd gotten promised this big promotion if he did this. He'd get the 6-figure raise and stock options, and he'd ascend to heaven, and his 25-year career would be capped, right? Until he figured out his purpose. So his purpose, this guy's name is Jostein Solheim. His purpose is to thrive in ambiguity and chaos for things that really matter. Now,
wow,
that is a crazy purpose. That's the kind of purpose.
Crazy purpose.
It only works if you're in a storm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It turned out that when you're running Ben & Jerry's, the way they set this thing up is that it has its own separate board of advisors, which includes Ben & Jerry and a bunch of other individuals who are very focused on social activism. And then they have a corporate owner called Unilever that acts as if those guys don't exist, and those guys act as if Unilever doesn't exist. And the CEO stands in between the two of those. Okay, I can't think of a more crazy place for anyone to have to be. But it turned out he was having the best time of his life. He was finding a place that the people loved him and he loved them. And he had to make a choice. Was he going to go follow his career, okay, and go do the thing that everybody around him was telling him to do, or was he going to listen? He listened, okay, and he stayed as CEO for about 8 years. He just now got the promotion that he would have gotten 8 years ago.
He's settling down, huh?
Well, after 8 years, it's kind of like, okay. And what's funny is that there's so many initiatives that they did in that period of time that would have not happened if he had not stayed. First of all, I was with the top team and him about 3 weeks ago, and I asked some of the crew who'd been there since Ben & Jerry had been there, what would have happened if he had left? And they said, well, we were all planning to quit and go work somewhere else. And then when he came back and told us he was staying, they all ripped up their resumes. And I said, okay, we're here for good. Now, the impact of that is all these amazing flavors and all these things that they've done, because that core essence of that entity and the magic of what Ben & Jerry's is still here. He's grown the business, and that team has grown the business from a $500 million to $1 billion business in a declining market, which is really amazingly hard to do for anybody. But, that is the beauty of purpose, is that it will show you the truth that you need to see. Okay? So, and this is just one example. I mean, he had no idea if the decision he made back then was going to be the right decision or not. Everybody told him it was the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. Now, it turns out, in retrospective, it was brilliant, but it sure didn't feel like it at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and what a beautiful story about following what your purpose is, because it's easy to get into like the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. Because I've done that myself professionally, where I was a top sales manager for it was like 1 out of 5 for a large company, and it was you get to the top and it's like okay, I want all the accolades. I'm bored. This isn't fulfilling. And so I get it.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that, we spend most of our life, chasing after those things are relatively compelling. And as long as they keep happening, then we sort of keep thinking that, the next one, and at some point we finally get to the top of the hill and then we go, is this it? And then we go, okay, so what is it that we're doing this for? Why are we really here? What is the gift that we're really here to bring? So I have one of the guys that did a nice quote in the book, and let's see if I can find it here. But it really gets to the point that I think many of us struggle with, and fundamentally, I guess the best way I can describe it is he talks about the fact that most of the meetings he would go to before he knew his purpose, he saw that he was there to basically shape other people's good ideas. Okay, here we go. Throughout my professional life, I could see how my purpose has directed me. Every part of the business has never been the same, and the reality is that what I realized is that my real purpose in being in a meeting was to bring the thing to the meeting that nobody else could. My job was no longer to be the one who helped refine and shape other people's good ideas as my only focus. Because when we did that, many times Rome was burning. Okay? What I needed to do was to speak from that voice inside of me that was my purpose that would make the biggest difference. In some ways, that's the gift that we each have. I mean, if you look at all the people we revere in the world, whether it's the Steve Jobs or the Mandelas or the Gandhis or the Lincolns or the Winston Churchills or whoever it happens to be, what's consistent is they were each unique, but they each had a point of view, and they were willing to speak from it. Right? In some ways, that's the opportunity of purpose.
I mean, can't say enough good things about your book, Leading from Purpose. I learned a lot personally, and I'm sure it's going to not only impact myself professionally, but those that I work with as well. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about next is impact. So a lot of times people look at that and they're kind of going, okay, well, I think I understand what impact means, but in relationship to purpose, what does that mean for our listeners?
It's interesting. Impact happens in many different ways. Listen, I think people get the impression, at least there's a version of purpose out there, which is you love doing it, you're really good at it, the world needs it, and it makes a difference. My experience is that when that's happening, or when that was happening in my life, or when that's been happening in most other people's lives, I don't think you need purpose. Okay? And I know people who have had all those things, and they didn't have purpose. And when the music stopped playing, it was awful. Where you really need purpose is when nobody wants you to do it, you're not sure you're good at it, and you got to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And in some sense, that's when we have the biggest impact, right? So, yeah. If I look at impact and I look at sort of what its consequences, so let's just wait. We can talk about business growth, right? And so Yostein was a wonderful example of where you actually get the real result. I've got a lot of individual stories about where people have had a real impact based on the businesses that they were running. But one of the women I worked with told some stories. Her purpose was, with tenacity, create brilliance. And it's a very simple purpose. And she told the story of, it's 2008, and she has spent the last 2 years opening an anchor store for a big retailer in Hong Kong. And, of course, they then decide that they have to shut down the store. And all the people that have moved to Hong Kong and relocated, they've got to lay off. Okay? And they were going to have HR go do it, but she said, no, you know what? I'm going to go do it. Okay, I'm going to close the store. But she said, I'm going to do it differently than you want me to, which is I'm going to make sure everybody gets a job. Okay, and I'm going to use all my credibility on the street, and I'm going to get all these people a job because I helped put them there. Now, she didn't have to do this, okay? And in the process of making this choice, she also knew she was going to be the one who had to take the package. So she goes about and does this and gets everybody but one person a job, okay? And so when she closes the door finally on the last day, she's incredibly happy. She is so living her purpose. And she takes the package. Now, for me, that's a beautiful example of impact, of doing what is it that really needs to be done, not what's being asked to be done. In some ways, it is about, purpose is about, and its impact is about really choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. And how do we step into that? In some ways, the examples that I have and some of the ones, the impact is not just, the impact isn't just work related. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for me personally, one of the interesting things about purpose is that when you know what your purpose is, it will let you know what the score is. And you know where you're leading from purpose really effectively. And you also get information and feedback on where is it that you're not, that you need to step up your game. And for many of the executives I've worked with, and it's also true for me, one of the places that we have been most challenged to lead from our purpose is in our personal life. And I have made more executives cry over dinners when we've talked about where's the part of your life you most need to be leading from your purpose that you're not. And the stories are incredible. I'll tell mine only because most of the stories I've been telling have been about everybody else, and I just want everybody to understand who's listening that it's not like I now live a life of bliss. Living from purpose is living from a place of continually seeing where the next opportunity is to step more fully into my purpose. In some ways, the true mastery of purpose is that you never really fully 100% are living in it because you're always stepping into the place where you need to step in more fully. 5 years ago, I was doing a brilliant job of living my purpose when I was working and running programs all over the world. And literally every place from Australia to London to Boston to Oklahoma City to Sao Paulo. So I was doing, and it was with amazing feedback that I was getting from people. And this stuff was really working. I had 2 girls. I was divorced single dad. And my 2 girls at the time were 13 and 16. Now, anybody listening who has 2 girls who are 13 and 16 know that they spend most of their time arguing. Right?
Yes.
and it's little arguing. It's just this sort of ongoing sort of background noise. It's like a cat fight's going on the whole time. And my challenge was that I was always jet lagged. So I was tending not to have the patience sometimes that I would like to have had. But one weekend I was having to make up for all the time I hadn't driven them all over the place, and my ex-wife and her husband had done all the time. So I was really proud of myself of, taking them all the places they needed to go. And I had to pick up the 16-year-old at 11 p.m. one night, on I think Saturday night, from a party. So I show up at 10:45. I'm 15 minutes early. I'm like, no big deal. I walk in and I take her out. And then what I don't realize is I was supposed to stay in the car. I was supposed to text her, right? And then she'd come out. And so I'd broken all the rules. Right. So in the car as we're driving home, she loses it and just tells me how I've embarrassed her in front of all of her friends. Right. And so it was a total meltdown. And her sister decides to start yelling and screaming at her at how much of a loser of a sister she is. Okay. And then I basically am telling them that they are both losers and I want them both to shut up because I can't take it. Right. And so it's when you're screaming in a car and yelling, it is just awful. It's just an awful feeling, right? You can't escape, right? The car is still moving. I actually stopped the car, pulled it to the side, and I almost wanted to get out of the car. And it was just one of those moments as a parent where you're just like, that you can't help yourself, and you so wish you could have, because it's just awful. Okay. Get home, it's just awful. It's one of these things where everybody goes to sleep, and you're just hoping the next morning you wake up and what happened didn't happen, and it's just you can start over again. Like hit the reset button, right? Don't you wish you could? And the girl sat down with me the next morning and said, Dad, we love you, but we just don't like spending time with you. Because, you're unpredictable. You're nice one minute and you're yelling the next. Oh, my God. So here I am teaching purpose to all these people in the world, and the one place I'm not living my purpose is with my two girls. Now, how did I know that? Was because once they got up and left, and I had to take them home and drop them off and whatever. And I was by myself. I sat down and had a conversation with my purpose, which basically said, if you were really leading from your purpose, here's how it would look. Here's what we would be doing differently. And it was humbling. I mean, it was sort of like, shit, what was I thinking? And it took me 3 hard years to get them back to the place I wanted to have them be. Actually, one of them I got back. The other one I'm still working on fully, to the level that I was feeling like we were back in the same place of safety. And now my purpose is to wake you up and have you be home. So here's a guy whose purpose is to wake you up and have you be home, which I can do all over the world. And if I sit next to anybody who's listening to this on an airplane, on a flight that's at least an hour, I promise you we will have figured out your purpose, and you will get whatever job you're supposed to get next. And I mean, all this stuff always happens, right? Except for with my kids. So, I was so humbled, Fran. I mean, it took me a lot of digging with these two girls, and living and listening to my purpose in a way I had never done it before, to be able to get it back to where I wanted it to be. Now, what I discovered was that the jerk I was being at home was the jerk I was in the office as well as, because when I went to the office and told them what I was working on, they said, well, you should probably do that here as well.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Okay, because, Mr. Jet-lagged is jet-lagged and just completely grumpy whenever he's in the office or he's at home, okay?
Oh.
And, but the point of the matter is the reason I'm saying this to you and everyone else is that I spend most days humbled as to the gap between what my purpose is calling me to do and what is it that actually I'm up to. And every day that happens, I then have to choose if I'm going to step into the purpose and really go for it. And if I'm going to wake myself up and be home and wake everyone else up and have them feel a sense of being home, then it is an ongoing, lifelong journey. There is no reaching someplace. There is always another door to go through and another opportunity. Now, it's not from a place of just having it kick me all over the place and sort of make me feel. It's interesting. What purpose will do is it will both motivate you and call you to be a better person at the same time, which I don't know anything else does. Usually, it's you feel like you've been beaten up, or you feel like you're being energized, but you don't usually feel both. You don't feel sort of this combo of energized as well as tested at the same time. It's the ultimate teacher. And so in some ways, I want everyone to understand that this is the real gift of purpose is that combination. I have so many people who are alumni who come up to me years, and I'll meet them in the airport. They'll come up to me and they'll laugh, and they'll go, look what you got me into. And we both laugh hysterically because we know exactly. And then they tell me a story like the one I just told. I go, oh, my God, there you go. It's like, so welcome to the show. Hopefully this is a helpful conversation for you to sort of get a sense
oh, my goodness.
of what I'm talking about around sort of the reality of what this is.
Well, on that note, we are going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Nick Craig in regards to his new book, Leading from Purpose. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here with leader and author Nick Craig, and he's sharing his new book with us, Leading from Purpose.
If I look honestly at my career as a manager, I was pretty intense. We'll put it that way. And it was just because I was all business. I had to get things done. And so I lacked that, not all the time, but there were times where I lacked that ability to be as human as I wanted to be, because I was so focused on just the business. So, I get it. And so when we have these ability, the opportunity to look back or look at how we are presenting ourselves, we can make adjustments and grow from there.
So that's the opportunity. I have this woman, Anna. Your story reminds me of another story, which is I have this woman, Anna, who, when I met her, she was a really serious lawyer person. Okay, she was a senior legal counsel for a corporation, and so and she was really good at what she did, but she was in the box of being the lawyer all the time, okay? Until she figured out her purpose. So I was sitting with her, we were working on our purpose, and we decided the journey we went on was her childhood magical moments. And as a kid, she loved being on stage, singing, dancing, reciting poetry. And she loved helping others do it. And she sort of was part of this whole group that created a theater program in the high school that she was a part of. And she forgot all about that. Okay. But when she sort of unpacked what her purpose is to inspire others to take a chance and own the stage. It was as if somebody had opened the door to purpose in a way that redefined her identity. Most of us, and I think what you're describing for yourself, there's an identity that there's a persona we identify with, which for many of us has to do with our profession, our expertise, our title, the university we went to, all of those things. The challenge is that, as you know as well, given what you now do for a living, is they're all fragile. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the true gift is knowing what's underneath all that. And for me, purpose is the ultimate identity that doesn't change. It's the one thing that isn't fragile. So for Anna, once she did this work and we played with it, she now, whenever she was doing meetings with marketing people to do a contract, she would ask them questions of how do you make this event more legendary, or how do we blow it out of the water and with our limited funds, or what's our social engagement? How will people remember us? And the marketing people are like, what? Who are you? And she's like, I'm Anna, and this is my purpose, and this is what we're going to talk about. And they're like, oh my God.
Where'd you come from? Yeah.
Seriously. And but the point was that she was asking questions that they should have been asking. And when she asked them and they thought about it, they came up with a better event. Okay? And then they were like, so then what started happening is that whenever they were going to do an event, they would have an excuse to have her look at the contract, and they would sit down and schedule more time so that she could ask all her crazy questions. And they could go, oh my God, she's much better at doing this than we are. Okay. I mean, right now, she called me about 3 weeks ago and she's now, she's a legal person. She's head of organizational change and culture as well. Now, this never happens in any company. Okay. And she's laughing as she's telling me, and we're going to do a bunch of stuff together, but she's laughing as she's telling me because everybody's giving this to her, and they have no idea why they're giving it to her. It doesn't make any sense. It's not on her resume. But purpose has the power of having us step into the gift and no longer be limited by the roles that we have. Okay? So anyway, so your story sort of reminded me of that one.
Well, hey, I'm glad, because it sounds like she's kind of reinventing some of her work where she's at, and for me, I left that industry and created a new industry for myself. So, it's interesting, when you follow that purpose, and that's why your book resonated so well with me. For whoever's on their path, they could pick it up and really start to get some headway.
Well, the hope is that in doing the work in the book, that you really do make some headway. And one of the things that we have in the book is, at the beginning of the book, you can do a self-assessment that will give you a sense of where you are in your relationship to purpose. And then after you've gone through the book, we ask you to do the assessment again. And you can see what the shift has been as a result of working through some of the stuff in the book, or just reading the book, okay, and just thinking about some of these things. I mean, if we look at you and you look at what you're doing, there's a gift that you bring to this medium and doing these podcasts that is you, and is your gift, and is your purpose, that is not anyone else's. And in some ways, that's the thing that I'm wanting to help everybody be able to clarify is what is that beautiful gift that you bring, and how do you bring it?
Well, and, I think I have time for maybe a couple more questions here.
Sure.
Like I told you, I have more questions, and I think we have time, so we may have to, bring you back and chat another day. But one of the questions I have is...
the next time we could just do the exercise of having you figure out your purpose, right?
That might be scary. I don't know.
Oh, we would have it.
Well, and it kind of brings me to my question. It's like, with all the people that you've worked with, what are some of the common fears that you see that come up that people are going, gosh, that they're just encountering doing this work?
I think the most common fear that everyone has is that if you know your purpose, you're going to have to leave your company, your family, and go move to India and feed the poor or something, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's an association with knowing your purpose and sort of becoming, working for a nonprofit. I think the reality is exactly the opposite. I think one of the gifts for me of having done this work is that most of the people I've done this work with have had normal lives making things. They have unruly customers. They have strategies that go poof in a second. They have people they hire that they think are great that turn out not to be, and they have to figure out what to do with it. They have other people who've been overlooked that deserve a second chance. This is the life we live, right? They have kids that don't behave or do things that they shouldn't, and they have to figure out, how to help them. This is the world we live in. And, one of my most fond moments in recent history was I'm sitting in front of a guy, and I say, so what do you do? He says, I'm in charge of Jiffy peanut butter. And I'm like, really? Jiffy peanut butter? I'm like, you're the Jiffy peanut butter guy. He says, yeah, basically I'm the guy. I'm like, okay. Now, we had a conversation where one of my childhood magical moments is eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and having my first crunchy peanut butter. Jif peanut butter, right? I can remember the moment. I can remember what it tastes like. And I'm having this conversation, and I'm like in my childhood magical moment with him. And it's like kind of like the reverse of the exercise is happening. And so we both kind of laugh. And I think my commitment to him at the time was that your purpose is just as important as somebody who's quote unquote saving the world. Right? I think for all of us, I think the fear is that if we have to have a purpose that is like saving the world. And for most of the people I work with, that's a way you express your purpose potentially. But if your purpose is to be Buzz Lightyear, which I have a guy whose purpose is to be Buzz Lightyear, and he actually looks like Buzz Lightyear physically. And it's like when he said his purpose, me and everybody else we literally all fell out of our chair laughing so hard. Okay. And, his purpose is to be, there's a whole orientation to what it means to be Buzz Lightyear, right? But here's a guy who grew up, his father left him and his mom, and he lived in a housing complex on welfare for a number of years. And that's how he grew up from there. And so his whole orientation and who he is about what does it mean to see the possibility. Okay, what does he do for now, right? What does he do now? He's president of Hershey's Chocolate, right? Okay. So, I mean, my sense is, but the thing is that I think we all fear that, if we know our purpose, we're going to have to go do all these crazy things. And the truth is that a lot of the times what purpose is going to do is to stop us chasing after stuff, right? And to be just okay with where we are, and to really own it. And the thing that purpose will help us most, one of the things purpose helps us deeply with, and I've seen this across so many groups, is the imposter syndrome. Most of us have this sort of narrative in our head where we walk in the door in whatever we work or some place where we are seen as a leader or whatever it is, and we all wonder how did we get here, and we're not supposed to be here, and somebody else should be doing this. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they're going to figure it out soon, They're
going to figure. Yeah, seriously. Now, here's the funny thing is so. A couple of years ago, I got to do this program at West Point for 2 or 3 years. We would work with a subset of the faculty and go through this program. So I'm dealing with people who have been in Afghanistan and Iraq, and there's a couple of people who have arms or legs that are no longer there. They've all lost friends. They do a career in which they're as smart as everyone else, but they make a lot less money, and there's a very likelihood that something bad will happen as part of their career. I mean, there's very few careers that sort of have on the dotted line, and you might die, right? As sort of, and it's okay. And there's no insurance. There's no insurance that comes with this, right?
Yeah.
And they were all at West Point, and many of them do like a 3 or 4 year tour of duty where they get a master's degree, and then they work with 144 cadets, or they teach math or whatever the case may be. And they all had the imposter syndrome, every one of them. And it was funny is they all thought everybody else in the room didn't.
Wow.
Okay? But the beautiful thing is when they spoke their purposes, they were just such beautiful purposes. And the interesting thing that really surprised me with those groups is that the word love and the word God were in many of their purposes. And I'd done this with clergy, and of course those words come up a lot for them. But outside of that, I was like, well, this isn't my normal corporate route. How is this possible? And I realized that if you're going to give your life to something of service in which you might die, in serving and protecting others, then if love or God isn't your purpose, you're probably in the wrong job.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to sort of work with those. But I think the imposter syndrome is something that purpose helps shift. Okay, so I think it's important for. I think there's a healthiness in having it because it keeps you humble in some ways. And at the same time, purpose is going to continue to always put us in situations where we could easily step into the imposter syndrome because it will always put us in situations that are probably a little more uncomfortable than the ones that we would put in if we weren't listening to our purpose.
Well, and that makes, it kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, are we kind of just redefining our purpose as we continue? We come up with certain situations and like, okay, I need to get my compass going due north again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if I look at my purpose is to wake you up and have you be home, I have to sit here a lot and say, what does it mean to have me create that for someone in a such situation, and am I in this moment, and why is it that's not happening, and what would it take to get there? And, it always means I'm going to have the difficult conversation with somebody. And in the power of doing it, it gets us to an outcome that is so much more compelling than the one I would be sitting on the other side. And it's a pattern interrupt from the normal things that people do. And it's the good pattern interrupt that we all value, but it requires courage, psychological courage. Psychological courage is that it feels scary on the inside, and you do it anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, my hope for all of us is to have more psychological courage.
I love that. Well, and what final thoughts do you want to leave our listeners with, Nick? Because again, if I ask another question, I'm sure we're going to kind of dive into a discussion that will take us much longer than we have today. But what little gems do you want to leave our listeners with today?
What I'd like to leave everyone with is the most powerful way of accessing purpose isn't through a phrase, okay, which is what we usually associate purpose with being, which is, here's my purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a key. That's an access, like a key to a room. It's the room that matters. And it's that room of purpose that has always been there with us. Now, the best way to access that room is to write down or tell one of your stories or multiple stories and to step back into it and really access the part of you that was in that moment, whether it's those magical moments from your childhood, a passion that you have, or some challenging experience that you were able to get through to the other side on. In those stories is our purpose. And in telling those stories, we step into our purpose. And do you really need to know what the words are, or do you need to operate from it? And I would say operating from it is 99% of the game.
That's beautiful. We are most definitely going to have you back on the show again, Nick. I mean, my goodness, you're such a fountain of information, especially when it comes to purpose. And I love how you are taking this to the next level for people, and for them, that's such a personal journey. I absolutely applaud what you're doing here.
Well, thank you very much, Marianne. I am so appreciative of having the container of your purpose today and helping us have this conversation and go these places that we've gone. I think we've gone really deep today, and it really is just a beautiful expression of who you are. And I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to sing my song on your stage.
Oh, well, thank you. My goodness. It has been such a joy to spend this time with you, Nick. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Nick. It has been a pleasure to spend this time with you. Your book is such a great resource. I highly suggest everyone pick up their own copy of Leading from Purpose. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and of course at all major retailers. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.